So Pitt's in the middle of what is effectively their only off week for the remainder of the season. They've got off from Saturday to Saturday. They don't have another break like that for the rest of the regular season schedule. There's 5 days off, I think in the second week of February or first week of February. They play on Monday night the 3rd, and then they don't play again until Saturday the 8th. But that's still 2 games in that week, and this is really the only time they have this much time off. It's their only off week. You know, some years the schedule works out that they get 2 weeks off. This year it's working out that they get 1 week off. There have been times where that week off that they've gotten is like after the last regular season, or they just don't play a regular season game on the final Saturday or something, and that counts as one of their off weeks. But this year they get this week off, and it's happening right now, and this is the only one. And so for the team, obviously for the players and the coaches, this is a major time to refocus on some things, do some self-scouting, try and figure out what's working, what's not, what adjustments or tweaks they can make. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I'm guessing Jeff Capel will say that they took a few days to get away from basketball, just needed a little time away from basketball. He often says that and encourages his players to do it, and I think there's probably a lot of value in that. I'm sure that's what they did or are doing this week, is taking a little bit of time off and then getting back to work probably, I would guess, midweek or a little bit later. But there's obviously things that this team needs to work on, and there are things that this team needs to do over the course of this week. For us, here on the outside, there's not a lot we can do to change our approach. We could just keep talking about it, keep talking about what this team has done through the first 18 games, through the first 7 ACC games, and what they need to do over the remaining 13 ACC games, 13 regular season games. And so today, we're doing sort of a classic bi-week topic, and it's the 5 big questions. 5 big questions that I think, or what I think are the 5 biggest questions facing Pitt during this off week, heading into Saturday's game at Syracuse, the first of the final 13, which will pretty much play out 2 games a week, after Saturday. they have a game on Saturday, and then it's 2 games a week through the first week of March. What are the 5 big questions facing this team? What are the 5 big questions they need to answer in order to stay kind of where they are? Right now inside the top 35 in the net rankings, they're still being pretty consistently mentioned as being in the NCAA tournament field. What are they going to need to do to keep themselves in that position or those positions here over the next month and couple of weeks, over the next 5 or 6 weeks, whatever that works out to, the next 13 games? What are the biggest questions facing this team? How are they going to keep themselves in the NCAA tournament field? 5 big questions. That's what we're doing today. It's Topic Radio on a podcast on YouTube right here on the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, I mean, it's not Topic Radio, but it is sort of a classic move to do a 5 big questions. But I mean, I think, we cover a lot of the big topics all the time. I mean, we're every day we're talking about the big topics facing Pitt football, Pitt basketball, the recruiting portal, recruiting, or the transfer portal, recruiting, all those different things. And we do it all the time. Yesterday we had a topic, and it was the 4-game losing streak, particularly focused on the Clemson game. Today we're obviously going to talk about the 4-game losing streak, but in the context of what needs to happen going forward. It is always a topic. It's just a matter of how we package that and what kind of form and structure it takes. And today it's going to take the structure of 5 big questions, the 5 big questions facing this team. Listen, in terms of questions and asking things, what we always ask you to do is to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content, whether it's our daily Morning Pitt videos that we have here every day of the week. Get your day started with a little bit of Pitt sports talk Monday through Friday. Our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. With me and Jim Hammett, and comments and questions from you. We always look forward to doing that. We'll have a good conversation tomorrow night, I'm sure. Or some of our post-game shows. We'll have to get some basketball post-game shows going here coming up in the near future. What time's this game on Saturday? We might be able to do one on Saturday. What is it, 12:30 game? We'll have to see. We'll have to see if the schedule works out for it. But either way, we'll get some post-game shows going for basketball. The post-game shows are always fun, doing them for football. And we did a few for basketball last year. We'll get those going. And it all happens right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, subscribe to the YouTube channel. The button's right down there. And then turn on notifications, and you'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live or post new videos or anything like that. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Oh, and of course, don't forget to check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. It's Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all of the Pitt sports coverage you can possibly handle and message boards for all the Pitt conversation you can possibly handle. And sometimes I notice how messy that table is behind me. I really need to clean that up. It's distracting to my eyes to see that. I need to block that off because it's just a bunch of junk that I probably should throw most of it away. And the stuff I shouldn't throw away, I should find a permanent home for. But I digress. 5 big questions facing this team. And I think there's probably a lot of different areas where we could start. But the number one area to start, I think, is with the guards, specifically with Jaylen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett. I think we all knew coming in what. It's supposed to be 5 questions. Damn it! I already ruined the bit here. What does Pitt need most from Jaylen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett? How can Lowe and Leggett most help this team win? There's a good question, huh? You like that? What can Jaylen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett do to help this team win the most? What does Pitt need from Lowe and Leggett? I think we all agreed and knew and understood coming into the season that Lowe and Leggett were Pitt's 2 best players and 2 most important players. I mean, we had ongoing debates, and I was reminded of this yesterday. I had actually forgotten about it. We had ongoing debates and discussions throughout the summer about whose team is it. Is it Jaylen Lowe's team or Ishmael Leggett's team? And I'm pretty sure I said and believed it was Jaylen Lowe's team. I continue to believe it's Jaylen Lowe's team, and I think there are a lot of things that can mean, but I only bring it up as a way of sort of remembering that and recalling that we all generally accepted, rightfully so, that those were the 2 best players on this team and the 2 most important players on this team. That was the case over the summer. It's been the case through the fall, and it continues to be the case now, that these 2 guys are going to be the ones who ultimately drive this team's success. They won't be the only players who are important. They won't be the only ones who help this team win games over the next 13 games and into the postseason. But they are the 2 guys at the top of the list. And not just at the top of the list for the opponent, although that's certainly the case, and it's an important fact to consider. But they're at the top of the list for Pitt. They are the most important players. So what does Pitt need from them? Pitt needs, from Jaylen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett, nothing much. It's pretty simple, actually. To score and to set up other scorers. That's all. Basically just be involved in every point that the team scores. That's the only thing Pitt is asking them to do. It's funny when we get down on these guys and we talk about how they're doing too much, or they're trying too much, or trying to do too much, or they're taking too many shots, or they're playing hero ball, or they're driving and not kicking, or they're just making ill-advised decisions. Like, these 2 guys are directly responsible or indirectly responsible. They are responsible directly or indirectly for every point the team scores. Every point. No, statistically, maybe not. Maybe there are points that are scored. There are other guys on the team who have assists. But one way or the other, Jaylen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett are involved in virtually every point the team scores. The ball is in their hands at some point on almost every possession. There are rare possessions when both of those guys are on the bench, but those possessions don't happen very often. They both play a ton of minutes. They both play prominent positions, and they have the ball all the time. If we think they're trying to do too much, it's because they are expected to do too much. They are expected to do almost all of it. Because, again, they are the best players on the team. And they don't have a Blake Henson out there, which the last 2 years had. It could be Bub Carrington and Ishmael Leggett and Jaylen Lowe, or some combination thereof, but they always had Blake Henson out there as well. And it doesn't mean that there was less pressure on Bub or Jaylen or Ishmael last year. It just means that there was also this other guy. And 2 years ago, it was on Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton. It was big. It was important. Those guys were right at the top of the list, but they had Blake Henson out there. And that's a game changer. And it doesn't necessarily mean this team can't win. It doesn't mean this team can't score. It doesn't mean this team can't be successful. What it does mean is that it's a different sort of dynamic, because there's even more, I think, being put on Lowe and Leggett this year. And I think those guys understand it. And if we feel like they're shooting too much, if we feel like they're trying to take on too much, do it all themselves, It's because they probably feel like they have to. Not that the other players on the team are bad, not that there aren't good players out there and the other guys who can make baskets, but those two are the most important players, and they know it, and they play like it. And here's the other part. Most of the time, those guys playing that way, it's going to lead to wins. It's going to lead to success. It's going to lead to this team getting what it wants. And when they get back to their winning ways, and it might be as soon as Saturday at Syracuse, ideally. I would rather not go through another couple of days on the message board with this losing streak extending. Although I think there have been some great conversations and discussions on the board. Not all, but most. A lot. When they get back to their winning ways, when they break this losing streak and start winning games again, Lowe and Leggett are still going to be the guys taking a ton of shots and scoring a ton of points. Now, they can be a little more judicious. They can be a little bit better in their decision making. They can be a little bit better at understanding when to continue pushing that drive all the way to the basket in hopes of drawing a foul, or when to kick it out to Guillermo Diaz-Graham or Zach Austin or Jorge Diaz-Graham or Damian Dunn or Brandon Cummings, or basically like all of those guys. There's a lot of guys that are available for kickouts, or even Lowe if you're Leggett, or Leggett if you're Lowe. There are a lot of guys available for kickouts who can knock down 3-point shots. And I feel like we've been saying this, certainly been saying it rather emphatically for the last week or two, maybe even dating back to the Duke game, but it's something we've known about this team. Their bread and butter is dribble drive, it's drive and kick, it's go to the hoop as a guard and either finish, draw a foul, or find someone to kick to. Whether it's a shooter on the outside or a center under the hoop. That's what this team is sort of built to do. And I think when they're at their best, that's probably what they're doing. That involves Lowe and Leggett. Those guys are ultimately going to score a lot of the points, but they need to distribute as well. Now, that's not to say they're not distributing. Jaylen Lowe is top 10 in the ACC, I think 5th in the ACC in assists per game. So while he's right there near the top in minutes per game and shots per game and all of those things, and number 1 in the conference in free throw percentage, he's also top 5 in the ACC in assists per game. He is distributing. He is setting up other players on the team, but he's also taking on a lot of the load himself, which he needs to do. I'm not going to say he's been perfect. I'm not going to say he needs to keep playing exactly as he has been, but a lot of the things that he's been doing, he's going to continue doing. And a lot of the things that Ishmael Leggett has been doing, he's going to continue doing because Pitt needs them too. So what's the answer to the question? What was the question? What does Pitt need from Jaylen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett? They need those guys to keep shooting, to keep driving, to keep attacking, to keep pressing defenses, but they also need to get a little bit more involvement from their teammates. They are Pitt's most important players and best players. They need to play like it and continue playing like it. All right, that's one question. Holy cow. We're already like 13 minutes into this. I've only gotten through one question. We better pick up the pace a little bit. Number 2, and this is something we've touched on a little bit. Can they get any better at rebounding? I'm not really sure that they can. I don't really know where the ceiling is for that. I was looking at some numbers on sportsreference.com of rebound percentage, the estimate of the percentage of available rebounds a player grabs while they're on the court, percentage-wise. And of guys who play regularly, Guillermo has the highest rebound percentage, 14.2%. Papa Conti and Cam Corn are both around 11.6. Ishmael Leggett's 9.6. I think they just are who they are. Your main rebounders for this team are going to be Guillermo and Cam Corn. I had a stat here that I wanted to see, but trying to find it. Corn's leading the team in rebounds. Ishmael Leggett's right there. Last year I think he was the leading rebounder. He's second right now, sandwiched in between Corn and Guillermo. That's who they are. It's who they're going to be. I'm not sure you're going to get that much better. There's probably some positioning things and preparation things you can do a little bit, but I'm not really sure that the ceiling is too much higher than it is right now for this team when it comes to rebounding. So on the question of rebounding, and we'll get through this question much quicker. How much better can they get at rebounding? I'm not sure they can get that much better at rebounding. They just have to keep, get as many offensive rebounds as they can. And obviously you want to prevent the other team from getting offensive boards, but we might have seen the team ceiling in that regard. So we might already know the answer to that question. And that leads sort of into the question about the center position. What should happen at the center position? And here again, this is something we've talked about in the past, certainly talked about it yesterday. When Guillermo Diaz-Graham played the center position against Clemson on Saturday, Pitt was plus 12 over the course of about 10 minutes. So that's obviously a positive. And I think I'm not going to go so far as to say they should replace Cam Corrin with Guillermo Diaz-Graham at center, but I am going to say that the minutes for Guillermo at the 5 should increase. And there's a second part to this, of course, which I'm going to get to next, but the minutes for Guillermo at the 5 should increase. The minutes for Papa Amadou Conti at the 5 should also increase. Yes, these minutes are going to come at the expense of Cam Corrin, but I think that's okay. And I'm not advocating benching him. I'm fine if he leads the team in minutes at the 5. But it should be closer to an even split between him and Guillermo Diaz-Graham, with Papa Amadou Conti filling out anywhere from 6 to 9 minutes, maybe 10 minutes each game. I think those are valuable minutes he can offer, and really contribute and give the team a boost, playing 4 to 6 minutes each half. I think he can be a positive influence there. I do think with Guillermo at the 5, a lot of good things happen. I think it creates more opportunities offensively. I think the rebounding is maybe a touch better. I think you end up, even though Cam Corrin was supposed to come in and be an improvement in the rebounding, according to Jeff Capel's plans and projections based on how he was used or wasn't used at Florida State. I think, Guillermo, with his length and activity, it just seems like he's able to get a little bit more, even though he's averaging fewer rebounds per game than Cam Corrin right now. He does have a higher rebound percentage, which I think is notable. That's particularly true on the offensive end. He's rebound percentage, one of the top guys. He's tops among the regular players, the guys who play regular extended minutes in defensive rebound percentage, I should say. I think I said offense. I meant defense. Although he's pretty high up in the offensive rebound percentage as well. I just think you got to get a more even split there with Guillermo and Cam Corrin, and then work Papa Amadou Conti in. And, that leads into my fourth question. How deep should this rotation be? You've got your 5-star. Well, we could have a separate conversation about who the 5 starters are or should be. I'm okay with continuing to stay with Leggett, with Lowe, Leggett, Zach Austin, Guillermo, and Cam Corrin as your starters. I think that's a good starting group. But I would probably move. You start there. You play 4 or 5 minutes with that group, and then you start mixing and matching. You get Papa Amadou Conti in at the 5. You get Jorge Diaz-Graham in. Probably to play next to Zach Austin. Potentially, if you bring in Damian Dunn, it could be 3 guards plus Jorge and a center. I think there's absolutely a case for Jorge to play more than he has. He showed what he could do in the Florida State game. Didn't play a lot against Clemson. I think that might be due to the defensive needs, that they needed someone who was better defensively than Jorge was able to offer in that game. But I think you can still find reasons to get him on the court and get shots, because you're going to get points out of it. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to get points if you can set up Jorge Diaz-Graham for shots. You're going to get points. And if there's a guy who can score for you, who can offer that, who can bring points, and get buckets, then you should be using him. And again, and I talked a lot about this yesterday, Jorge's emergence, I think, allows you to play Guillermo more at the 5. Because without Jorge, you're kind of stuck at the 4 in terms of what your depth looks like. It's basically Zach Austin and Guillermo. And you really can't use Guillermo as much at the 5 because you need him to be in that platoon at the 4. He's the only other guy who really could play the 4. But when Jorge has emerged, if Amsal Delilich is not going to emerge, then Jorge has to be the guy who has emerged, who could take some of those minutes at the 4 along with Zach Austin. But I think you get into a rotation like that and you have 2 guards, 2 wings, and a center, 3 guards, 1 wing, and a center. You get Guillermo more minutes at the 5. You get Jorge on the court more. You get Papa Amadou Conti on the court more. You balance Cam Corrin's workload. I think these tweaks, and I'm just basing this on what has worked in the games. You know what I mean? When you look at what has been successful, it's largely some of these things we're talking about. 2 guards, 2 wings, and a center. Guillermo playing the 5. Papa Amadou Conti being on the court. Jorge being on the court. We've seen these things work in games. That's the evidence I have to go on. Maybe it's not working in practice, but it's working in the games. And that seems like a good place to start. All right, then the last one. The last question we have right here. What does Pitt need to do over the next 13 games to stay in the NCAA tournament field and get themselves a postseason berth? I think the first thing and the most important thing, you got to get some good wins, obviously, but I really think, avoid the bad losses. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So less than half of the final 13 games are currently quad 3 or quad 4 games. At Syracuse, home against Virginia, home against Miami, home against Syracuse, home against Georgia Tech, and at Boston College home against Boston College to close it out. So you've got all these home games, in one road game against teams that are outside the top 100, outside the top 140 in the net rankings. These are the absolute must-win games. These 6 games, provided all these teams stay around the same area they're at in the net rankings, these 6 games are the most important games. At some point along the line, you need to get some quality wins, some quad 2 wins, some quad 1 wins if you can. I mean, you got North Carolina, Wake Forest, at UNC, at SMU, at Notre Dame, at Louisville, at NC State. You got a bunch of these road games, and if you can steal a couple of those, that's great. But you cannot lose these 6 quad 3 and quad 4 games. You cannot. You have got to win those games because that was ultimately what kept this team out last year. Is some of those bad losses. I think that's what really did them in. They played a poor non-conference schedule, and that hurt. And then having some of those bad losses is what ultimately doomed them to miss the NCAA tournament. So don't lose those games. Win those 6. Steal a couple of the quad 1 and quad 2 games, particularly on the road, and you've got yourself an NCAA tournament bid. This team is still very much in contention for a spot. I think most of the bracketologists that you see have them still in as of right now, but everybody's watching to see. And if this 4-game losing streak turns into 5 or 6 and you start bouncing in a couple quad 3 and quad 4 losses, then you're not going to have any legs to stand on. You are going to be out. Nobody wants that. So, what does Pitt need to do to make the NCAA tournament? There's a few things. Number 1, don't lose these games. Quad 3, quad 4 games. Do not lose. All right, those are 5 big questions. What other questions do you have? And I mean, save all the snarky stuff. Let's have a real conversation about where this team is, where they need to be, and what needs to happen over the next 13 games. What are your answers to my questions, and what are the questions you have? What do you think are the 5 biggest questions facing this team heading into these final 5 or 6 weeks of basketball, final 13 games of the regular season? All right, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Check out Panther-Lair.com for all of our coverage. And hope your week got off to a great start. I hope you're staying warm. It is a cold one out there, but enjoy your Tuesday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.